This is Shelley Craft. We're coming to you live on SNN Live. We're at the Disruptive Growth Company Showcase 2017 in New York City. I have with me today on the program Vincent Brown from Power Clouds, Inc. It's a publicly traded company on the OTC markets, and the symbol is PWCL. Vincent, welcome to SNN Live.
Great, Shelley. Thank you for having me on.
It's good to have you. Let's get started with an overview of the company, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, Power Clouds is a renewable energy power company. We operate predominantly in Europe.
Let's talk about this for a minute. Explain it on the basis of what do you install, what do you grab, how does it affect the power grid?
Well, basically, these are utility scale parks, so they're not on a roof of a house. They're like the size of a football field. On average, they're about maybe an acre or two. An average park we would buy would power about 7,000 houses, and that's the effect it would have on the power grid. Predominantly, we tend to purchase parks that are already built, they're already existing revenues, and they operate where the government is the counterparty, not a private company. So in that respect, we have a government customer who has guaranteed us a fixed rate of income for 15 plus years for as long as we operate the parks.
Let's go into the business model. How does it work?
Well, we have a very, very simple business model. Basically, the sun shines on the panels that we operate in our parks. Those parks are connected to the local government power grid. And as a result, then every megawatt of power we could produce, we get a fixed rate of income paid by the government to us over a 15 to 20 year period.
Where does the power company fit into this?
The power company actually doesn't fit in. We are in effect a power producer ourselves, so we're the power company. And so rather than selling it though to the end customer, we basically sell it on a wholesale basis to a government department in Italy.
And then they in turn sell it to the individual homeowners.
They in turn sell it, or in our respect, we get a government subsidy. So a lot of our income is based on government fixed payments to us from the government, so not necessarily from a power company. So in our case, the income comes from a government-backed contract who says for every megawatt of power you produce, Power Clouds, we will pay you a fixed rate per megawatt hour for 15 years.
Who built these parks that make them available for you to buy?
Well, the company was founded in 2013 by Roberto Forlani, our CEO, and he built the first parks himself. He's an electrical engineer by background, and so that enabled us to understand and improve the market. There's about there's 6 megawatts currently operational that he built in Romania. Since then, we've expanded into the Italian market where we actually purchase then these parks that are built by someone else. So those people may be private companies who saw a benefit by building them for tax reasons or for the extra income they get, or they're built by expert companies, which would be called EPC companies, who basically build them and then sell them to us as a customer, and we take them and operate them for the 15 or 20 years of the incentive period.
So the growth of this is where?
Well, solar market continues to grow, but for our particular business, the good news is we get very predictable flat revenue streams for 15 years. The bad news is, of course, you don't get organic growth with that model. So what we do is our growth is purely driven by acquiring new parks and acquiring additional capability. And so that's really what our business model is. So we're in the aggregation of micro power parks across Europe. They're already existing, so we know the background and the track record of the park before we purchase it. So we're basically buying cash flows that continue for this 15 to 20 years.
Are you buying it right?
Well, we always try to buy it right. We have a lot of due diligence. We use market-leading and top-tier advisor companies, both on the legal, on the financial, and on the technical side to verify and vet the parks before we purchase them. So we're very confident as we buy them that whatever we're paying, which is a discount against the future revenue stream, is guaranteed. So it's a very predictable revenue stream we have.
So Europe in general, like most places, are trying to get away from fossil fuels, am I correct? So that's kind of where, there's no resistance to building these parks, I would think.
No, we're in a very receptive, I call it the open door market. There is no growth limitation right now. The first market we're in is Italy. In Italy alone, there's like 18 gigawatts of power, of solar power only installed. Now that may not mean a lot to most people, but that would power a small city for a year.
So let me do a comparison here. In the United States, they're running around and putting solar on people's roofs. This is a completely different concept. Am I correct?
You are totally correct. I'm glad you brought that up. So these are football stadium size parks. They're utility parks, they're called. So we don't have all of the costs associated with operating multiple thousands of little parks and plants and everywhere else. We have one big park that basically runs itself. So we operate under 85% EBITDA margins for every park we operate. So it's significantly cash positive.
So you're a European company, but yet you're listed in the U.S. Why'd you do that?
Well, no, I'm pleased you brought that up. We fundamentally believe that if you look at the U.S. market today, most public companies in the U.S. have U.S. assets. So there's very few, if any, companies where they're listed. You can buy the stock in a U.S. company and invest in a U.S. company, but all of the income and assets are outside of the U.S., which we think is a very attractive, for want of a better term, portfolio management or hedging against a U.S.-only renewable energy play. So that's why we listed in the U.S.
Are you going to continue along the same strategy, or do you have other strategies also?
Well, no, our core strategy is to acquire existing parks. We've particularly spent the last 2 years working on how to acquire small parks. So everybody hears about solar. It's massive deals. They're all hundreds of millions everywhere, gigawatts and gigawatts. We focus very much on these small independent parks that we're basically aggregating up to create a diversified portfolio of multiple parks that over time will grow to be in effect a single park. And we do that, again, starting in Italy, but we're now expanding through Europe. The reason for that is we understand the market very well. We only go to geographies where there is government support in place. So our business model remains the same, but our geography may spread.
Give me a little insight into the rest of the management team.
No, it's great. The company was founded, as I said, in 2013 by Roberto Falani. Roberto is an expert in engineering and electrical engineering, so he is our brains in terms of where we go, how things are put together. He will vet the parks, very experienced in operating the parks post-acquisition so that we can get the maximum from them. And so he did a great job in terms of founding the business. Obviously, these have turned into financial products. So for him, it's not as interesting. My conversations around earnings, and we did turn EBITDA positive in our last quarter. We showed 93% improvement year on year. For every park we acquire, for example, we add immediate cash flow the next day. So we're working on the next phase where we will go to, for example, countries such as India we're looking at in the longer term. That's going to be one of the next biggest solar operators in the world, and so on, those kind of countries. And that's where Roberto's skill really comes to bear.
Let's get your website out there for more information, if you would.
That's great, yeah. www.powercloudsinc.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent Brown, Power Clouds Inc. It's a publicly traded company, and the symbol is PWCL on OTC markets. I'm Shelley Kraft. This is SNN Live, and we're coming to you live from the Disruptive Growth Company Showcase 2017 here in New York City. Vincent, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Shelley. Thank you.